I'm really intrigued by G League Ignite's Tyler Smith, who to me is a very strange prospect and fits into a weird archetype as, to me, a pretty true throwback stretch four, which we're going to dive into more in this video. And we don't see a lot of those in the league anymore. I think Smith is the kind of prospect who's a little too small to really play the five and not skilled enough to play the wing consistently. But I don't think that means he's bad or doesn't have value. So I want to go through some of his offense today and think about how he can be used and how he can develop. As always, would love a sub, like, comment. All of that stuff helps the channel a ton. But, of course, the key part of the stretch four is the stretch. And Smith is one of the best shooters in this class, regardless of position. I mean, obviously his height helps, but he is a pick and pop demon. He shot like 46% on open catch and shoots this year, which is crazy. Just did not miss at all. Smooth, high release, capable of using a little one dribble to reset himself, and flashed enough off dribble shooting to intrigue me, right? He's comfortable. It's nothing crazy, but he can take a dribble and set himself up. He loves this 1-2, quick, smooth, high release. Like, the form is just beautiful. It's a beautiful looking jumper. And the results are the same. Here he is running off of like a horns action, starting at the high post and getting screened. His movement shooting, he's not like sprinting off of screens and contorting his body in midair like JJ Redick, but he is a really nice basic movement shooter off of these pin downs and down screens, and he's an incredible face-up shooter from all over the floor. And this shot is just the confidence to face over a dude from deep. And Tyler is, he'll throw back, pop to mid-range. He's money from this face-up mid-range area. His touch in that spot is awesome. And like I said before, he's flashed a little bit of off-dribble shooting in that, in that mid-range area where Smith can dribble to his right? Lefty shooters tend to like to shoot moving right because their left arm is naturally aligned that way, and it's really hard to contest his shot and to bother him. His percentages weren't as great on guarded catch and shoots and guarded jumpers as well, but it didn't look like he was missing because he was super thrown off or his mechanics changed. His mechanics are always the same, which is obviously a really, really good sign. And his shooting numbers are in strong company. Like these benchmarks for volume and free throw are like well below what Smith did. But still, we have, anywhere from Laurie to Jaren Jackson to Gordon Hayward, all of these players who are, there's not very many prospects with this kind of shooting at that size. But the question, right, what separates a, Jabari Smith, Jaren Jackson, Laurie from a Grant Jarrett or a Jake Layman is what else they do. And that's what I'm trying to figure out with Tyler, is what else besides that versatile shooting, which I do think is legit and probably enough to get him on the floor. And the main way that Smith gets his offense is like post cut stuff, and he is weird. He's really interesting. Great job here sealing, finishing with like the inside off hands, and I suspect that Tyler Smith is a natural righty, because no way a natural lefty is doing this. You have a wide open dunk or, just go up strong. Tyler's like, nope, I'm going to dribble out, take a super contested righty floater and get an and one. Like, he was really bad on layups this year, and we'll get to that just because I think some of the strength and explosiveness issues, but the touch with that right hand is crazy. And obviously he can and will finish with his left, but clearly is very, very comfortable finishing with his off hand, to the point where I'm like suspiciously like, this is like Aaron Henry type vibe where he's really a righty. But again, Smith spinning off in the post, really contested shot, hits a lefty hook. This is the main thing he's doing on offense. And again, there's that face-up game. No clue how Smith made this shot. As you can see, he's not generating a ton of push and space. He's just not explosive or strong enough to do that consistently, but he has the touch to get these ridiculous shots off over defenders anyway. And I think it's not just these running hooks, but also the face-ups as well, where he can kind of like throw back Jabari Smith style, right? Face up into a jumper. I accidentally put this clip twice, but it is absolutely ridiculous. Now, Smith has some issues as a driver. And this is kind of what I mean when I say he's not a wing, where I don't think Smith is nearly strong or fluid or has the handle to consistently operate on the perimeter, where Smith is just like not strong enough to get any push to this defender, throws up a really bad shot there, and that stuff is kind of common in his tape. I just realized I was muted for a second. Whoops. But again, Smith really needs to add strength. He's not great at this bump point where Tyler tries to like use his chest to move this defender backwards, but he just can't because of his lack of upper body strength. I think is really significant and shows up in a big way where he's just not able to carve out and generate space like he needs to. And I don't really think he's going to be much of a post-up threat in the league, right? He wasn't a good post-up player in the G League, and I don't think that's really going to continue. And even when he does drive fluidly, right? And he's going to draw closeouts. For most of these players, it's, okay, can they be a good enough shooter to draw closeouts? Tyler Smith is drawing closeouts. But what does he do after, like when he's run off the line? And I think Smith, we see him miss a pretty open pass. We'll talk about his passing a little bit, or lack thereof, a little bit later. But Smith really just like weak handle, so often out of control. I would love to see him learn to play off of 2 feet more, take a hop step, balance himself, but obviously he doesn't really have the strength to do that at this point and likes to rely on that fluidity more than anything else, kind of because he has to. And while the handle is sometimes functional, overall the ball control is just not great. As you kind of see that like the first step is pretty solid. He can definitely move, but he's too easy to pluck away his handle. The ball control is not where he needs to be. But then you have flashes like this, where this might be my favorite play of his the entire season, where Smith actually gets low, holds off Jarris with his handle. Look at that flexibility, and don't know how he stays upright. Smith is not normally a very balanced player. I'd say that's one of his main issues. I think probably core strength and stuff leading to his imbalances, especially as a finisher. But this is wild. This is crazy. Euro back to the left side, finish with the inside hand. The flashes are tantalizing, and we see again, all of these are like righty finishes, but the touch here is great. Off foot finish, off foot, offhand finish to throw off the timing of the defender there. This is advanced driving flashes, and this is the kind of stuff where you're like, okay, Tyler is raw. He played in a tough league. G League Ignite was a mess, and he flashed stuff like this. Even if it wasn't really consistent at all, it did happen, and Smith showed the ability. And Smith can also get up a little bit in space. This was a nasty, nasty poster. He's not like a crazy vertical athlete in traffic, but when he's rolling to the rim, and I think he didn't do it so much this year, but I do think he can be a pretty solid roll scorer because he can shoot face-up jumpers, right? He can shoot from this free throw line area, and then he can get up and dunk over people when he has time and space to rise and fire. But one of my other main preclusions with him as a short roll guy, and just as a perimeter player, is his pretty much complete lack of playmaking. Smith really struggles to make decisions on the short roll. First, he's kind of open. Not really, actually. This is a different clip. But he has modest cutting, pretty wide open. Doesn't look at him. Ends up throwing up a tough shot. Ends up getting his rebound and drawing a foul. But it's not what you want to see process-wise. Again, Tyler misses this wide open corner. Doesn't really look like he's processing the floor at all. Kind of just head down scoring mode. And Smith ends up throwing up a wild shot again. And then we see one more time Smith just not comfortable making decisions. And I think that it's the lack of handling comfort. I gotta stop saying that made up word. It's the lack of comfort as a handler and the lack of comfort as a decision maker. I think his feel for the game is pretty behind. Again, Smith has a wide open jumper, doesn't want to shoot it, has a couple passing options, doesn't want to take them, gets blocked on a bad scoop attempt. So these are the kind of main improvement areas that I'm seeing for Tyler, and I accidentally put that clip in twice, but it's sick. And I'm curious about some of the old main throwback stretch fours, because the guys he reminds me of, at least profile-wise, aren't in the NBA. I think of a guy like Ryan Anderson, who, excuse this horrible quality footage, but, he was an awesome trail shooter, such a sick college player in 2008, I think. Could shoot from deep range off of the trail, stretch the defense out. shoot off of movement, was very much a unicorn type player for his era with his high volume, versatile shooting. And I think that's part of what makes Smith so good as a shooter. We've talked about how important things like volume and versatility are, and Smith is incredible there. That's a place where Anderson really shined in college. Anderson was also a good passer and much better than Tyler, in my opinion. This was an awesome little read here. Posting up, drawing a double team, firing inside to the other big. And then in the NBA, right, he kind of did the same stuff. Incredibly good trail three-point shooter, stretched the floor for these Rockets teams, and attacked a little bit off of closeouts. I love this little Dirk fade. That's beautiful. Channing Frye is another name I think of as maybe an even more apt Smith comparison just because of body type, where Frye was like a pick and pop guy, a trail guy. He could relocate. I love this play from Frye where he's going to get the ball in the corner, pass back, ghost one way, relocate the other way. Lowry was lost and he ends up getting a three off. Like, this kind of off-ball movement isn't something that Smith has shown as much of, unfortunately. It's more just stationary stuff and less a real understanding for spacing, which I think is going to have to come for Tyler as well. And part of what makes him, he is a very, very raw prospect. He is very, very raw. But there is clear value, as we see with Ryan Anderson, a guy like Channing Frye. And Channing was a demon in the mid-range as well. He could attack closeouts and hit mid-range pull-up jumpers, something that I think Tyler Smith can do. We've seen him do. Again, we see Channing here kind of slipping into space and hitting a little floater. I think these are, this is the kind of usage I imagine, but just a little more modern. Maybe a little less post-ups, more driving. But again, Smith as this, versatile big shooter who can, hopefully, Tyler Smith's defense is a big question. Hopefully can give you some size on the defensive end and hold up as a rebounder. And there really aren't a ton of players of Smith's archetype in the league today. Rui Hachimura has emerged as a stretch four of sorts late into his career, where he was great catching the ball off of LeBron's gravity. And as a stretch four, right, they want to have Jokic guarding in the paint, but Rui's spacing threat brings him out, and he's able to hit that open three. The thing for Rui and some of these other players we're going to show, though, is they didn't start as stretch fours. Rui was a face-up scoring four in college who didn't shoot threes, and he's expanded his driving game to allow him to hit these shots. It used to be just back in, dribble, face up, but now Rui can smoothly dribble into a pull-up jumper, contributing to his evolution as, a more modern stretch four type scorer rather than the guy he used to be. Rui can still hit these post fades over defenders when the clock slows down, and I think this is going to be a big shot for Smith to keep working on. And you see how Rui can generate push with his strength, his upper body. He's bumping Niang. I have no clue what Niang is doing, to be perfectly honest, but he bumps him away, fades, and generates space. Tyler Smith is not good at generating and creating space in these actions, and Rui is a great cutter too. I didn't show much of it, but Smith is also a pretty smart cutter who can rise pretty quickly, like we saw in that one crazy dunk. But Rui learned to do that. PJ Washington has been kind of a revelation in the playoffs, but again, I think was more post and interior oriented in college than Tyler Smith is as a prospect. But we've seen how invaluable this kind of player who can be, who isn't really playing much center, right? He's always playing next to Lively or Gafford or even Maxi Kleba, but can punish these defenses that want to pack the paint and think they can against bigger lineups. But PJ, of course, just godly in the corner this playoffs. Having that stretch four who doesn't, take away size on defense, allows you to clog passing lanes and do that kind of stuff. And he's not a great defender, but he has utility. PJ can also score a little in the post against mismatches. We see him easily turning over Mike Conley there as well, something we've seen from Tyler Smith, right? That little post turn hook, and PJ can drive, hit a little floater there from Daniel Gafford. So versatile offense stuff that creates mismatch problems. You want to put a big on him because he's small, but you can't because he's a perimeter guy. And when you have to put your fourth or fifth perimeter guy like Gordon Hayward, for who God knows why he was playing in this series, but that's just not going to be good enough to sustain this. And I think we're kind of seeing a resurgence of the stretch four. least in some ways. Jabari Smith is kind of the star example of this because of his pull-up shooting, but to me, he really is a 4. I don't think he's the handler, the playmaker, at least not yet, to play on the wing, and though I know they did play him at center towards the end of the year, I think his optimal defensive position is still just like a rangy ground coverage 4. Jabari did play well off of Şengün, though. Defenses want to send pressure to Şengün because he's such a dangerous player in the post, and Jabari's going to bring the bigs out of the paint, space the floor, add huge value that way. And I think Smith can maybe replicate some of like the post face-up scoring stuff that Jabari does, where, once again, Jabari wins with his high release. Not the greatest dribbler, but because he can get up and shoot over people with great touch, both from the post, and then we see him facing up and fading to his left here. I think these are kind of shots that Smith can add to his arsenal as he grows and strengthens and matures to his body. And there are 2 prospects in the last couple drafts that are like stretch 4s to me. And Taylor Hendricks is one of them in Utah, who's like a weak side rim protector on defense, who mainly just spaces the floor on offense and is, I think, even more limited offensively than Smith was. Actually, certainly more limited offensively than Smith was, because Hendricks was a defense-first prospect, unlike Tyler Smith. Basic spot shooting, some cutting, some easy like drives and post fades. Hendricks, I think, could be really solid just because of his defense, and he's going to do these stretch 4 things. Once again, we see him hitting a little drive into a post hook. This is something that Smith does. We saw Smith do it earlier in the video, and I think he can emulate. Also wanted to shout out Noah Clowney, who really came on towards the end of this year as a stretch 4 type with the Nets. He can attack a closeout. His strength is impressive, and I think this is a good example of Tyler Smith does not have this kind of contact bump strength where he can throw off a defender, keep his balance in his straight line to the rim. That's something that Smith is going to need to develop. And because of all of this, Tyler is one of the most intriguing upside swings to me in this class. He's quite raw, as we've seen, physically, both in terms of strength and technique and feel on both ends of the floor. Defense is going to be a huge swing skill for him. There have been flashes, but it's mostly pretty bad at this point. But the possible offensive versatility is undeniable, and I think teams can take his development in different ways. Maybe they want to try to make him into a wing and really focus on the handling and some of the decision-making. Maybe they want to focus on making him more of a big and work on the finishing and the interior scoring stuff. Or maybe they just want to try him as this kind of tweener stretch 4 that we don't really see much anymore, but maybe we're going to begin to see again. And I'm really excited to track Tyler's development and his growth and how his eventual team uses him and tries to aim his development, because I think he is malleable and can fit a lot of different schemes and systems, just being the tall shooter he is. And though I don't personally have Smith in my lottery, I certainly get that approach. His upside is real as a serious utility player on the offensive end. There's a long way to go for him, but I do think he has one of the most intriguing offensive ceilings, probably as more of a role guy, but who knows? Maybe if he's a legit special shooter, there can be some star stuff.